The night was quiet, the kind of eerie stillness that made every sound feel louder than it should. Emma walked briskly down the dimly lit sidewalk, gripping the leash of her dog, Shadow. He was a massive German shepherd, his muscles tense, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness ahead. To any passerby, he looked like an ordinary pet, but in reality, Shadow was far from just a companion. He was a highly trained police canine, retired but still as sharp as ever. Emma trusted him with her life. She had no idea how soon she'd have to. As she turned a corner onto a less crowded street, the distant hum of city life faded, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness. The flickering streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, distorting figures in strange and unsettling ways. That's when she heard them, footsteps. Not just one pair but several. They were deliberate, too steady to be random. Emma's grip on Shadow's leash tightened as her heart pounded in her chest. She quickened her pace, but so did they. Before she could react, 3 figures emerged from the shadows, their faces partially hidden beneath hoodies. They blocked her path, forming a loose half-circle around her. A cold rush of fear shot through her veins, but she kept her expression neutral. She had read enough news stories to know that fear only fueled people like this. "Hey there," one of them said. His voice casual but laced with something sinister. "Out a little late, aren't you?" Emma swallowed hard. "Just heading home." The tallest of the group took a slow step closer, eyeing Shadow. "Nice dog," he muttered. "Bet he's expensive." Shadow let out a low, warning growl, his body tense like a coiled spring. Emma saw the way the men glanced at each other, exchanging silent signals. She knew what was coming. They thought she was just an easy target, another unsuspecting person in the wrong place at the wrong time. But they had no idea what they were about to face. One of them lunged forward, reaching for her bag. That was their first mistake. In an instant, Shadow sprang into action. With lightning speed, he twisted out of Emma's grip and launched himself at the nearest attacker, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's wrist. A scream tore through the night as the thug stumbled backward, struggling to shake the dog off. The other 2 panicked. One of them pulled out a knife, but before he could even lift it, Shadow released his first target and turned on the second, his sharp instincts calculating every movement with precision. The street, once quiet, was now filled with chaos. Shouts, growls, the sound of bodies hitting the pavement. The men had expected an easy target, but instead they were facing a trained protector, one who didn't know fear. And then, just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse for them, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the night. Someone had called the police. And Shadow, he was just getting started. The flashing red and blue lights painted the dark street in flickering shadows. Emma stood frozen, her pulse still racing, watching as the officers restrained the men. Shadow remained at her side, his ears perked, his breathing steady, but she could feel the tension in his stance. He was still on high alert, still waiting for the next move. One of the officers turned to her. "We're taking them in for attempted assault and possession of a weapon. You'll need to give a statement." Emma nodded, barely hearing him. Her mind was stuck on that smirk, the way the tallest man had looked at her before being shoved into the police car. It wasn't just arrogance. It was something else. A quiet confidence, like he knew something she didn't. She swallowed hard, gripping Shadow's leash tighter. "They knew I'd be here," she murmured. "This wasn't random." The officer frowned. "What do you mean?" Emma hesitated, trying to put her thoughts into words. They weren't just looking for trouble. They were waiting. I could feel it. And when I asked if they knew me, he didn't deny it. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner before looking back at her. "Do you have any reason to think someone would target you?" Emma exhaled slowly. "Not that I know of." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. She lived a quiet life, worked a normal job, had no enemies, or so she thought. Yet something about this night felt orchestrated, as if she had walked straight into a trap. Shadow let out a low rumble in his throat, pulling her out of her thoughts. She reached down, resting a hand on his head. He was still uneasy, and that alone made her uneasy. The officer nodded. We'll run their records, see if anything comes up. In the meantime, if anything feels off, call us immediately. Emma nodded again, but she knew the unease wouldn't disappear that easily. She had always felt safe with Shadow by her side. But tonight had proven that safety wasn't guaranteed. As the police car pulled away, taking the men with it, Emma finally exhaled. The street was quiet again, but now the silence felt different, heavier. She turned toward home, Shadow moving in sync with her, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. With each step, questions swirled in her mind. Who were those men? Why had they chosen her? And more importantly, was this really over? Because deep down she knew the answer. Emma barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the scene replayed in her mind. The footsteps, the flickering streetlights, the way the men had watched her like they had been waiting. Shadow lay by her bed, his ears twitching at every sound outside, just as restless as she was. She reached down, running her fingers through his fur, finding comfort in his steady presence. But even that didn't erase the feeling deep in her gut. Something wasn't right. By morning, the fear had settled into something sharper. Determination. She needed answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that the attack hadn't been random, and until she knew why, she wouldn't be able to move past it. At the police station, Emma sat across from Officer Lane, the woman who had arrived at the scene the night before. The room was quiet, aside from the faint sound of voices outside the door. A cup of untouched coffee sat between them, growing cold. Lane flipped through a file, scanning its contents before finally looking up. They're not first-timers, she said, tapping her pen against the paper. Petty theft, breaking and entering, a few assault charges. But nothing that suggests they planned something like this. Emma frowned. Then why did it feel like they were waiting for me? Lane exhaled, leaning back in her chair. That's the part that doesn't fit. But here's what does. Two of them lawyered up immediately. The third. She slid a page across the table. The tall one. His name is Greg Dawson. He wouldn't talk, but he did make one call. Emma picked up the page, scanning the phone number listed at the bottom. It didn't mean anything to her, but something about it sent a chill through her. Who did he call? Lane's jaw tightened. A man named Robert Hayes. We're still digging, but Hayes has a reputation. Money laundering, fraud, suspected ties to organized crime. Nothing that's ever stuck. But he's not the kind of person you want to owe favors to. Emma's stomach twisted. Why would someone like that care about me? That's what we're trying to figure out. Lane folded her arms. Do you have any connections to him? Even indirectly? Emma shook her head. I don't think so. But doubt crept in again. She had always lived a normal life. But what if she had crossed paths with the wrong person without even realizing it? Lane watched her carefully. Until we know more, you need to be careful. If this was a warning, it means they're not done. Emma swallowed hard. And if it wasn't a warning? Lane's expression darkened. Then it was just the beginning. As Emma left the station, Shadow trotted beside her, sensing the tension in her shoulders. The city felt different now, like every stranger's glance held a hidden meaning. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and kept walking, but one thought refused to leave her mind. Someone had sent those men after her, and she had no idea why. Emma kept her head down as she walked home, Shadow's steady presence the only thing keeping her from unraveling completely. The city felt colder, the streets somehow unfamiliar even though she had walked them countless times before. Every passing car, every set of eyes lingering too long, sent her pulse racing. She told herself she was being paranoid, but deep down she knew better. Someone was watching. That night she double-checked the locks, drew the curtains tight, and kept Shadow close. His ears flicked at every distant noise. His body tense, always ready. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone, her mind circling the same question over and over. Who was Robert Hayes, and why was she on his radar? Unable to sit still, she pulled out her laptop and started searching. His name brought up news articles, vague mentions of shady business dealings, whispered rumors of people who crossed him disappearing without a trace. But nothing concrete. Nothing that explained why he would care about someone like her. Then she found something that made her breath catch. A name buried in an old article, one she hadn't thought about in years. Daniel Carter. Her hands went cold as she clicked the link. The article was from nearly a decade ago, a brief mention of a police investigation into a suspected money laundering operation. Daniel Carter had been an officer on the case, one of the few willing to speak out against corruption. But before anything could come of it, he had been killed in a car accident. At least that's what the report said. Emma swallowed hard. She knew the truth. Daniel Carter had been her father. She clenched her fists, her mind racing. She had been just a kid when he died, too young to understand what was happening. Her mother had told her to forget, to move on, but now it was all coming back. Her father had been digging into something dangerous, something connected to Robert Hayes. And now, years later, Emma was being targeted. Her breath came fast and shallow. If this was about her father, it meant Hayes hadn't forgotten. Maybe he thought she knew something. Maybe he wanted to make sure she never found out. A noise outside made her freeze. A faint rustling just beyond the window. Shadow's head snapped up. His body instantly alert. Emma didn't move, barely even breathed. Slowly, she reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. But before she could dial, Shadow let out a deep, warning growl. Then the power went out. The house was plunged into darkness. Emma's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Shadow pressed against her leg. His entire body rigid, waiting. Then came the sound of a door handle turning. Someone was inside. Emma's breath hitched as the door handle turned. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Shadow stood motionless, his growl low and threatening, ready to strike. Emma forced herself to move, gripping the nearest object, a heavy glass from the counter, her knuckles white around it. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her feet stayed planted. If she ran, she wouldn't know who was after her. And she needed to know. Creak. The sound of careful, measured footsteps on the wooden floor. Whoever was there wasn't rushing. They weren't afraid. They were confident, controlled. They had done this before. The darkness made everything worse. Emma's heartbeat pounded so loud she swore they could hear it. Shadow's body tensed, waiting for her signal. Then another sound, closer this time. A faint exhale, like someone steadying themselves before making a move. Emma acted first. She flung the glass toward the sound, the shattering explosion cutting through the silence. In the same instant, Shadow lunged. A curse rang out, followed by a sharp crash as something, or someone, hit the floor hard. A struggle erupted in the dark, Shadow's deep snarls mixing with the frantic scuffling of limbs. Emma fumbled for her phone, hands shaking as she turned on the flashlight. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing a man on the floor, Shadow pinning him down, his teeth inches from the intruder's throat. The man's face twisted in panic as he struggled against the dog's strength. But it wasn't just any man. Emma's stomach flipped as recognition hit her like a punch. Greg Dawson. The same man who had attacked her in the alley. The one who had smirked as he was taken away. He wasn't in jail. Emma took a step back, the realization making her dizzy. "How?" she started, but Greg cut her off with a grimace. "You don't get it, do you?" he gritted out, struggling against Shadow's weight. "You were never supposed to walk away." Emma's fingers tightened around her phone. "What are you talking about?" Greg let out a breathless laugh, his eyes flashing with something that made Emma's skin crawl. "Hayes doesn't let loose ends live." Her blood ran cold. Greg's expression shifted as he stared at her. "You think this is just about your dad," he muttered. "You're in deeper than you even realize." Emma's mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew was slipping through her fingers. If this wasn't just about her father's investigation, then what was it about? A distant sound outside made her snap back to reality. Tires rolling over pavement, slowing to a stop. Headlights flashed through the cracks in the curtains. Greg's expression twisted into something darker. "You're too late," he murmured. Emma barely had time to process the words before the front door burst open. The front door slammed open, crashing against the wall. Emma barely had time to react before heavy footsteps filled the entryway. Shadow's growl deepened, his body coiled, ready to strike. Greg went still beneath him, a smirk creeping onto his face as if he already knew how this would end. A tall figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the headlights. His presence filled the space, his movements slow and deliberate. Emma's stomach twisted. She didn't need an introduction. This was Robert Hayes. "Let him up," Hayes said, his voice calm, almost amused. Emma didn't move. Shadow remained firmly on Greg, his teeth bared, waiting for her command. But Hayes only sighed, stepping further into the dimly lit room. "You have no idea what you're caught up in, do you?" he said, studying her. His gaze was sharp, assessing, like he was deciding if she was worth explaining things to. "This isn't about your father anymore." Emma's fingers clenched into fists. "Then what is it about?" Hayes tilted his head, the smirk never leaving his face. "It's about you." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Every thought, every theory she had about why this was happening unraveled in an instant. This wasn't just about her father's investigation. It was about her. But why? Greg shifted under Shadow's weight. "She doesn't know," he muttered, almost to himself. Hayes exhaled, shaking his head. "Of course she doesn't." He looked at Emma again, something almost sympathetic in his expression. "You were never supposed to find out. Your father didn't just stumble onto something dangerous. He took something. And he hid it where no one would ever think to look." Emma's mind raced. "What are you talking about?" Hayes took another step forward. "He hid it in you." The room spun. Emma felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her. Didn't make sense. She had nothing. She had lived a normal life. There was nothing her father could have possibly hidden. Unless he had hidden something without her knowing. Memories rushed back. Things she had ignored as a child. Late-night phone calls. Conversations that ended abruptly when she walked into the room. Her father whispering to her mother, "She can't ever know." Her pulse pounded. What did he hide? Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's what I intend to find out." The next moment everything happened at once. Hayes moved, reaching inside his coat. Shadow leaped, knocking Greg aside and lunging straight for Hayes. Emma grabbed the closest thing, her father's old flashlight from the counter, and swung as hard as she could. The impact cracked against Hayes's wrist, making him drop what he had been reaching for. A gun clattered to the floor. Shadow went for his arm, teeth sinking into fabric as Hayes cursed, struggling. Greg tried to move, but Emma kicked the gun across the room, sending it spinning out of reach. She grabbed her phone, fumbling with shaky hands, pressing the emergency dial. Hayes stopped fighting. He locked eyes with her, breathing hard. Then, to her horror, he smiled. "You think this is over," he murmured. The sound of sirens filled the night. Red and blue lights flashed through the window. The weight of everything crashed down on her at once. Shadow stood beside her, panting, never looking away from Hayes as officers stormed inside. They took Greg first, then Hayes, forcing him to the ground. But even as he was cuffed, his smirk didn't fade. "You'll figure it out soon enough," he said as they dragged him away. Emma's heart pounded as she stood frozen in the chaos. This was over. But deep inside she knew Hayes was right. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The house was still a mess when the officers finally left. The flashing lights had disappeared, the chaos had settled, but Emma stood frozen in the silence, staring at the spot where Hayes had last stood. His words echoed in her mind. "You'll figure it out soon enough." Shadow nudged her hand, his warm breath grounding her. She sank to her knees beside him, running her fingers through his fur. He had saved her, more times than she could count. She wrapped her arms around him, holding on as the weight of everything crashed down. She should have felt safe now. Hayes was gone. Greg was gone. But the fear still clung to her, an unshakable feeling that this wasn't truly over. The next morning, Officer Lane sat across from her in the same interrogation room as before, but this time the tension felt different. The case had cracked open, but instead of relief, there were more questions than answers. Lane flipped through the case file. We found encrypted files on Hayes's personal computer, but they're locked behind security measures even our tech team is struggling to break. We believe your father's name is hidden somewhere inside. Emma's throat tightened. And you think whatever he hid is in there? Lane nodded. It's possible. But we also have reason to believe that's not the only place. She leaned forward. Emma, is there anything at all, your father left you before he died? Something that didn't seem important at the time. Emma's mind raced. She had nothing. No secret letters, no hidden messages. But then, an image flashed in her mind. Her father's old pocket watch. It had been a part of him, something he never left behind. When he died, her mother had kept it in a small wooden box, saying it was the only thing they had left of him. Emma had never opened it, never questioned it. Her pulse quickened. I think I might have something, she said. Lane's eyes sharpened. Where is it? Emma swallowed. At my mother's house. That night, she sat at her mother's kitchen table, staring at the small wooden box that had been gathering dust on the top shelf of the closet for years. Her mother watched her, worry in her eyes. I never thought to look inside, her mother admitted. I just couldn't. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened it. The pocket watch was heavier than she remembered, the cool metal smooth beneath her fingertips. She turned it over. Her breath caught. There, engraved into the back, was something she had never noticed before. Series of numbers. Code. Her father had hidden something. And Hayes had known all along. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. This wasn't over. Not yet. Shadow sat beside her, his ears perked, always watching. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone.